All right, let's talk about the political fallout following an uncertain 48 hours after a string of suspicious packages were delivered all around the country.
As you can see from the rundown on the side of your screen, this is what we're talking about right now at 6:30. So let's start with what we know. Authorities discover more suspicious packages, bringing the total to 10. It's just the latest in a series of packages sent to high-profile Democrats, including former Presidents Obama and Clinton. The acts of terror leading President Trump to try to change his tune.
Acts or threats of political violence of any kind have no place in the United States of America.
That was then, but then just a few hours later at a rally in Wisconsin.
The media also has a responsibility to set a civil tone and to stop the endless hostility and constant negative and oftentimes false attacks and stories.
But this morning, in true Trump fashion, the president tweeted, quote, "A very big part of the anger we see in our society is caused by the purposely false and inaccurate reporting of the mainstream media that I refer to as fake news. It has gotten so bad and hateful that it is beyond description. Mainstream media must clean up its act fast."
All right, let's talk a little bit more about those packages. One was sent to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
We are fine, thanks to the men and women of the Secret Service who intercepted the package addressed to us long before it made its way to our home. But it is a troubling time, isn't it? And it's a time of deep divisions, and we have to do everything we can to bring our country together.
All of the packages appear to have targeted Democrats and people or organizations highly critical of President Trump. Many Democrats tonight are blaming the president for his rhetoric about media bias.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
Fake news, folks, fake news.
What's your message today?
Typical New York Times fake stories.
But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news. I'm so proud of myself. I didn't call them the fake news media.
That last comment was just last month, but the president's disdain for the media started well before then. Here's what he said back in August.
I'm so proud of myself. I didn't call them the fake news media. I didn't call them. I said to myself, I will not today in front of our great armed forces call them fake news. We know the real truth, but we won't say it today.
Meantime, tonight, people on the right are questioning whether the suspicious package plot was just what they're saying is a false flag operation by Democrats ahead of the midterms. We should note there is no evidence of that.
Meanwhile, Congresswoman Maxine Waters and former Attorney General Eric Holder were both sent packages. The two have been under fire for making controversial remarks some view as threatening towards the Republican Party.
Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
But Michelle says that, when they go low, we go high. No. When they go low, we kick them.
All right, so let's talk about the rhetoric we've heard on both sides of this. Our panel tonight, Democratic strategist Roger Fisk and Republican strategist Alana Rately. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Evening.
The president first, it seems like he's made an about face. At first he came out, his tone was very conciliatory. And then the tweet this morning to the nation where he said a very big part of the anger we see today in our society is caused by the purposely false and inaccurate reporting of the mainstream media, for which I refer to as the fake news. Can the president really blame the media for this string of suspicious packages aimed at people who have been critical of him? Or does he need to take some of the blame for this? Roger, I'll start with you.
There's not a single president in our history that's been happy with their coverage. This can't be new information for the current president that they are put under a microscope by the media, and that's the media's job. It's not their job to amplify the agenda of the administration or something else. There's a couple things that came through crystal clear. One, this was a slow pitch right over home plate. He didn't have to do all that much to be presidential and to nail exactly the tone and the substance that the country was looking for him. And of course, he had to pivot. He had to make it about him. He had to go and turn it into a victim kind of self-pity experience for himself, like he often does. And the most frustrating thing for me is that, you know, I look at the stories that don't happen. And this was an assassination attempt on two former presidents that in any other administration would be helping the current president. Think of sentencing reform, and if President Trump had reached out to President Obama and engaged him in that. Think of rebuilding Puerto Rico, and if he had reached out to President George W. Bush and engaged him in that, where we would be on those policy initiatives. But the need to insult and divide and the constant appetite for self-pity rules his world, and that's how he acted in this situation, and I think we've exhausted the idea that he's ever going to change.
Alana, one of the things the president has also mentioned is that it was the media's responsibility to really set the tone, set a civil tone. That was something that came up last night. What's your takeaway so far on the reaction we've seen over the last 24 to 36 hours?
Well, I'd say at the beginning, I was pleased to see that there was a more conciliatory tone and that people were being kinder to one another. You know, I was impressed that he was, you know, reaching out, and he did have a nicer tone, you know, at first. So I was a little hopeful there, but I look at both sides, and really this is a two-way street. And I think the president, you know, in his past as a businessman is used to people, you know, working along those types of relationships. And Mr. Fisk has a good point that the media is not going to have that relationship with a president, and no president's going to be happy with it. I think, you know, this is what we have when we elect a businessman for our president and not a politician. So I don't think it's unexpected. It's certainly not what many people want per se, but it's kind of like a brother and sister fighting, right? I'm not going to be nice to you until you're nice to me, and I don't think either one is going to give in on that.
Mm-hmm. Let's just say we don't know at this point who is behind this, but we know we've heard some folks on the far right, Rush Limbaugh and others, spouting the theory that Democrats came up with this plot themselves as a way to put them ahead for the midterm elections. Is it dangerous to sort of put this sort of information out there, Roger?
Absolutely. I actually joked yesterday that it was just going to be a question of time until some of the right-wing echo chambers started to say that the Democrats mailed these devices. But before close of business yesterday, that was already out in the ether. It's tremendously saddening when you think of how the president could have dealt with this moment. Doesn't even say the former president's names. I mean, the low-key hostility perpetuated and expanded on by the press secretary today is very, very palpable. And I can't even imagine where this leads from here. I keep thinking that we've reached the bottom, but the bottom just keeps redefining itself. And let me just say one thing very quickly about both sides do this. There's 335 million Americans. There's 535 members of Congress. There's thousands of reporters and talking heads like Alana and me. There is one president that sets the tone, and find me a single father or mother in this country that can look at their kids and point at the president and say, see son, see daughter, act like him. No one can.
Alana, we're certainly going to let you have the last word because we've obviously gone pretty long here. But as we move ahead, I mean, I think we know that we weren't really expecting to see a whole sea change in the national dialogue right now. We have a very contentious midterm coming up. And I thought back to, I don't know if you remember, in 2008, there was a McCain volunteer, and this made national headlines. Back in Pittsburgh, she claimed that she was assaulted by a man who carved a B in her face. And the guy, she claimed, said, you're going to be a Barack supporter now. That turned out to be a hoax. That is documented fact. That happened years ago. But this is just such an ugly environment. And I think, Alana, when we have civil conversations like this, I wish we saw more of it.
I absolutely agree. You know, I would like to see that this was the turning point where we could be a little more civil to each other. But, you know, if we didn't call for some action after Steve Scalise was nearly murdered last year, I don't think that this is going to change things either. I mean, that was so severe. That should have been a time to call for a change, and that didn't happen then.
Well, we know the president talked about that. He gave a very, very well-received speech right after that as well, and people thought maybe that was going to be the turning point. It was not for anyone.
Yeah, we've seen some change since then. All right, Roger Fisk, Alana Raitley, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you both. While the investigation and search for whomever's responsible now stretches from New York to Delaware to D.C. to Florida and California, it involves 2 former presidents, a former vice president, a member of Congress, CNN, and a Hollywood star, and there could be more out there. The investigation and the search now stretches all the way across the country. We'll check in with a little bit more right now.
Yeah, Tom Fitzgerald standing by with the very latest on that part of the investigation tonight, Fitz.
Yeah, Jim, Sean, in this building behind us at the FBI headquarters, the Joint Terrorism Task Force is hard at work tonight. Amongst in that team are FBI profilers, people who are trying to get a picture of exactly who the person is who's doing this. One of them, who used to work in this building, was a woman by the name of Mary Ellen O'Toole. She's a former FBI profiler and now runs the Forensic Science Department at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. O'Toole, speaking to Fox 5 tonight, says that forensics are really going to be a big help in all this. Finding DNA, finding fibers, finding fingerprints, if they can, all of it in the hopes of identifying who this is.
The way the person could have left evidence is actually in multiple ways. So they could have licked the stamps, which would give us DNA. As they put the tape around the envelope, that Scotch tape, they could have left fingerprints.
Also under consideration here, the construction of these devices. Remember, the one commonality of all of them, none of them, fortunately, have gone off. But was that intentional or was there an accident? We know there were pyrotechnics, wires, and timers in this. O'Toole says figuring that out will determine the motivation of this person who eventually will be profiled by the FBI.
They will look at these devices, reverse engineer them, and they will look for what is it about this device that doesn't allow it to detonate, and is that something the same in all the devices? That would indicate not that this is a sloppy bomb maker, but that he intentionally did not want these devices to detonate.
Jim and Sean, right now it is believed that these packages were mailed sometime between Tuesday and Thursday of last week. All of the devices, we are told, are going to be analyzed at the FBI laboratory down in Quantico, Virginia.
Thank you very much, Fitz. All right, here's a look at some of the other stories we're following in case you missed them. Another story from Saudi Arabia about the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. In an apparent effort to ease international outrage, Saudi prosecutors said evidence shows Khashoggi's killing was premeditated. Also, the CIA's director reportedly got access to all the evidence in the case, including audio and video recordings. And the caravan is on the move again. At least 7,000 migrants resumed their march towards the U.S. border after resting overnight in southern Mexico. President Trump threatened to send troops to the border to assist Border Patrol. And a heads up, Maryland's early voting centers are now open daily, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. until Thursday, November 1st. There is at least one early voting center in each county. For more information, check out our website, fox5dc.com.